So we have what is going. Basically, what's going on with the IDW is what's going on with the ice shelf. It's starting to accelerate the breakup. A breakup that I think sort of started, ironically, with some Sam Harris stuff, where he said that Charles Murray was the most unfairly maligned man of his lifetime. And it also, I think, started to crack when it was solidified by the New York Times in that weird photo shoot where all these guys are like jumping out of bushes.
Barry Weiss wrote that story too.
Yes, the Barry Weiss piece, which like also like you see Michael Shermer coming out of a bush, and if you look up some of the things that Michael Shermer's been involved in, you'll this is not for now, but some irony in him hiding in the bushes. Anyway, I want to focus now on Sam Harris criticizing the guy who tried to fire me. That's, I think, what he'll be on his tombstone a long time from now. The guy who tried to fire Matt Leck, Bret Weinstein. So here's Sam Harris in his Ask Me Anything 18. And he's about 3 minutes into an answer where one of his fans is like, why don't you guys just sit down and you can hash this out, and in the very, I would say, naive way that this fan base is sort of takes these exercises. And Sam Harris is like, no, he's too much of a lying charlatan. And I want to play a little bit of that now before we go into, I think, maybe even more a funny one.
Variants. And again, ignoring the fact that natural immunity is also doing that. And it's curious that Bret and Heather are not seeing that, because again, they run everything through the logic of evolution.
This is about a, you know what, let's skip a little bit ahead actually, because we want to avoid some of the vax stuff. Just
with variants has anything to do with vaccination.
Anyway,
seems a little bonkers, because the biggest problem, the Delta variant, emerged in India and became prevalent there.
I can't explain what's happening though. Basically, Bret Weinstein saying some BS about evolution of the virus after the vaccine. It's a complete fabrication, and Sam Harris is calling out about that. It's fabrication that other people are peddling recently, but we won't get into that either right now.
Conditions where exactly no one was vaccinated. We know that the emergence of Delta has nothing to do with our vaccination regime. The whole thrust of their comments there is confused, right? And once again, the subtext to everything they're saying, no matter how reasonable and attentive to caveats they can seem, and I will grant you, they can seem incredibly reasonable. They do not seem like Alex Jones. And this is why what they're doing is so insidious. But the basic message, the basic implication of everything they say, and the apparent reason behind everything they're saying is the belief that these COVID vaccines are dangerous, and you should be worried about them. You should be profoundly
hesitant. That is a very clear crystallization of how to read, I think, these sorts of, I call them crypto-reactionary media figures. They have some sort of project where there's all, like Sam Harris says, all the nuance in the world, all the caveats, all the buyer beware, all the, consult your own medical doctors, all this and that. But the fundamental underlying, the base note of that, if you just disregard the lyrics for a second, is be afraid of the vaccine. And it's horrible. And Sam Harris is right to not want to be associated with it. As we pointed out before, a similar thing was going on with the base note of Sam Harris with regards to if you should welcome Muslims to your community for the last 20 years. But it's nice that he can recognize this in Bret Weinstein. Now, I want to shout out Logic Guy for this tweet, which is where the next portion of this comes from. Logic Guy, if you want to hear a convo from two guys who just discovered I want to be a little bit charitable here, because these two fellas, look, they still think Sam Harris has a lot to say about the Middle East. They're on a journey, okay, and what I think what's interesting about this is not a problem of intelligence or anything like that. This is an ideological issue. Go on.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was just going to say I was never a Sam Harris fan, but the first couple of times I saw his stuff, I wasn't immediately like, running in the opposite direction. We're all on a journey. Yeah.
And what's interesting about that is the way they talk about Harris is similar to how we would talk about Hitchens. And in that, like, he might take these positions, but he has a breadth of knowledge. And I frankly do not see that in Sam Harris. That's where I disagree with these chaps.
I do too.
But anyway, what's entertaining is them coming to the, like, basically, like I said, the scales falling from the eyes of this, of Bret Weinstein.
Yeah. Let's do it. Okay, one idea I had is we could talk about the Weinsteins for like 10 minutes, just because I'm honestly curious what you think of this whole fucking.
We should totally talk about that. Yeah, okay. Fuck yeah.
I don't even know what to make of this, but okay, yeah, obviously. So Eric and Bret, it's Weinstein, right?
People say both, but Weinstein. Yeah. So Eric and Bret, they're famous brothers, and I think like most people, I was made aware of them probably like 2 years ago ish. I don't know if it was via Sam Harris or some other mechanism, but they were like in that whole IDW crowd. And, Eric was a physicist, Bret's the biologist, and they had both been on the Sam Harris podcast, Joe Rogan, etc. And they were interesting.
I don't think Eric is a physicist. I think he's a mathematician that claims that he has breakthroughs in the field of physics that are worthy of a Nobel Prize. So it's an easy mistake to make.
People, right? Like, Bret was caught up in the whole.
Sorry. I didn't mean to do that one.
We've done videos, right, of him making those claims.
The MVP one. Maybe I need to resurface that one. I need to curate a Weinstein thing. Now that I'm pretty sure he's not going to sue me, because frankly, he has to worry about maybe his own lawsuits with the amount of his. A lot of families that wish that their family member got vaccinated instead of listening to his dumbass.
Evergreen scandal. Eric was like he had some interesting credentials as like sort of a young genius in like math and physics, right? He I think he went to UPenn, graduated in 3 years, went to Harvard, got a PhD like very quickly, but had like learning disability he talks about and stuff. So, and also like is able to generate these epic storylines for as narrations for like cultural events that I think are it's kind of intoxicating. Like he has this ability, this storytelling ability to like tie events together and narrate them in certain ways and bring the focus onto certain aspects of the problem that you had missed and like come up with acronyms that describe things. And like a lot of people, I was like, oh, this seems like a smart guy, and he,
you know what he is. And I'm coming around on Bill Simmons because Woz is now at the Ringer. I used to be a big Bill Simmons fan back in the day, and then I soured on him because as his culture cachet and criticism, whatever. But what Weinstein is like a Bill Simmons, where like Bill Simmons will apply like Friends metaphors to sports. Or vice versa, right? Like who's the best? Who's the like Steph Curry of like prestige drama, right? Like that's a Bill Simmons thing. This is what Eric Weinstein does too. It is and it's clever. I mean, it feels like meaning, and it feels like just by drawing these different references in, and it kind of is in a certain way. And I mean, to be honest, like I'm certain. To be charitable for a little bit, if you listen to like the Portal or whatever, occasionally they'll use a metaphor that actually describes something that accurately in a way you feel is actually useful. But anyway, it's a limited utility, I think.
There's a whole group of charlatans that does that. What's his name? Malcolm Gladwell is a great example of somebody who could come up with like a metaphor that like might sound clever, like on the first reading. And then you think about it a second, it's like, okay, well, this is actually very much like leading me in a very particular way of thinking. Mm-hmm.
And just to fill up a book proposal. I mean, really.
Kind of entered my list of people to just like pay attention to.
So Eric Weinstein kind of busts on the scene as just a random ass guest on Sam Harris's podcast, and he did a phenomenal job. That conversation is excellent, and his big contribution was fighting back against this wokeness. And so it was kind of like he was the Samuel L. Jackson character in the Avengers, going to different different thinkers and trying to unite them. And he coined the term intellectual dark web, and he brought all these people to.
I'm sorry, that I haven't seen the Avengers, but I know that, I think enough, that dynamic of Samuel Jackson go and say, hey, we got to do some fighting or something like that. That is so funny to me, especially like knowing that they actually disdain Bret and Eric, but like even, oh man, anyway.
I don't want to, we have a lot to get to in this, so I don't want to derail it by saying this, but I haven't seen the Avengers either, and I'm sure people in our audience have, and I don't want to make any kind of big statements about it, but it is funny how much like this kind of like right-wing group of folks, you know, kind of logic bros, like that is like a cornerstone for how they understand a lot of the world, is by comparing it to the Avengers.
It's like what Harry Potter used to be, or still kind of is for libs.
It's what Harry Potter was to like Warren liberals.
Yes, you
the
know,
Avengers is to, I don't know.
I mean, this is how far we've fallen from the days of John Milton, when it was
scientists loving.
At least the text we used to draw everything from was the Bible that we all shared. Now it's like, you know, some people.
See how far society has fallen.
This is the fall
for Matlack here.
This is the fall. I'm going Tradcath or whatever. I actually don't follow that enough to even know what I'm saying. I was raised Catholic, but anyway, we'll continue.
Together, who were radically different and radically across the political spectrum. So like Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, Christina Hoff Sommers, Joe Rogan, Douglas Murray, etc. Eric then catapults his brother.
I wouldn't say that is also a radically wide spectrum there. I think, for instance, all those people, if you ask them certain questions like, where do you think about like land reform in developing countries, or Gaza, you might find certain consistency with regards to that.
Or phrenology.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to accuse all those people of phrenology, but you know, you invite Sam Harris or Charles Murray in there.
Other Bret into the limelight as well, and this is because he was attacked by these woke activists at Evergreen. But I learned a lot from him. He was a super interesting guy. But over the last, like 6 months, they have just completely destroyed their public reputation. It is like a complete fucking meltdown, and it shows how corrosive conspiracy thinking can be.
And also taking on an identity as a contrarian. This, I think, is like a big part of it for me, is like identifying as someone who must be against whatever the current cultural norms are.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's like reflexive contrarianism. And it's
nice.
It's really interesting because Eric had also been, for the last like 9 years, talking about having a grand unified theory of physics, which is a fucking ballsy thing to say. And if you're going to say something like that, and if you're going to make a public reputation out of having a grand unifying theory, like whoever does this, so we need to set this up for the audience. So grand unifying theory, TLDR, is that you have two.
This is where they're useful because they're able to explain how, and for life of me, I don't know why it wasn't clear earlier to some people. And this is the case with the Weinsteins. People who know what they're talking about, looking into their claims about this stuff, saying, hey, wait a second, this is all flim-flam, and you're full of shit, and you actually don't deserve a Nobel Prize, nor do the two other siblings, probably, that you think for independent other projects. There's this guy who's on the Decoding the Gurus podcast that Eric Weinstein was saying was like harassing him and saying all this crazy stuff about like how he's being unfairly like vigorous in his criticism of him. But you'll see why like that the criticism is valid, because these guys are charlatans.
Giant theories of physics, general relativity and quantum mechanics, and they're both basically our most well corroborated theories of physics
that we have, but yet they don't agree with one another. They can't be made to cohere into a single theory. And so physicists are trying to come up with one theory to rule them all, the theory which unites the two.
And this has been going on since Einstein, right? So Einstein comes up with general relativity, quantum mechanics comes about shortly after, and then Einstein sort of makes it his life goal to unify these theories. So, since Einstein, there have been brilliant physicists for a long time trying to unify these things, and no one has been successful. And okay, so this is like a very, very hard problem. Eric has claimed to have solved this problem.
The theory is called geometric unity. I think he literally said that if his theory is true, it would enable faster than light travel.
Oh, that's one thing. Yeah. So Eric shows up to Oxford, gives a talk about his purported theory of anything, which is like
theory of everything, not theory of anything.
At Oxford. This motherfucker gets a talk at Oxford. I mean, Jordan Peterson's also done that. I think a lot of shitty people have given talks at Oxford. But there's an interesting one with Nixon, I believe. But man, like these guys, again, Eric Weinstein works for Peter Thiel, and his brother like had a bad experience that he immediately went and talked to Tucker Carlson about. I mean, like,
yeah, I thought these guys were being silenced.
Yeah.
Anything.
Well, it turns out to be a theory of goddamn anything.
Yeah. More apt description, maybe. So he gives this whiteboard talk, but then doesn't write a paper about it, right? Like, if you claim you have a theory of everything, you should probably write it up and submit it somewhere, or at least put it on an open access server like the archive, so that people can like criticize it. And if it's right, that's fantastic. We could have a theory of everything, which would be a massive breakthrough. Anyway, so I don't know if it was recently he started feeling pressure to actually produce this document. Like he started talking more and more about it. So for some subset of reasons, he decides to write up his theory and puts it online on April 1st of this year, right? Yeah, April 1st, 2021. I think immediately before that, there was a paper/manuscript made available by two people, Tim Nguyen and Theo Pollia. And basically just showed there's like severe problems with this theory.
This scandal just gives us so much insight into human psychology, which we'll get to. But so he didn't release the paper through the peer-reviewed method, which is something I participate in, you participate in. If you're just in academia, you participate in the peer review. But he didn't do that. He released a flashy website where you can become a subscriber and you get access to his publication, which is not meant to be read by his peers. It's meant to be read by his fans. This is Eric's geometric unity. And you don't have to understand too much math because like the central contribution of...
We need to do this, David. You need to schematize a utopian socialism like pre-Marxists, and we can sell it to patrons. Like we only need 1,477 people.
One paragraph at a time.
Yeah, exactly.
Just slowly leaking it to them.
Geometric unity relies on this new mathematical object called the Shiab operator. And Shiab, SHIAB, stands for ship in a bottle. I have no idea what it does. But I know that if you're going to introduce something new, you have to be able to define it. And in Eric's work, he says that he forgot how to define this thing. This is laughable. This is laughable. And
this is the key to his theory.
This is the core, like the keystone thing, which everything relies on. And he doesn't know how to fucking define it. And what the hell are you doing, man? Like, if you don't know how to define something, that's fine.
Yeah.
But then just don't go around bragging that you have a theory of everything, because any scrupulous mathematician or academic.
Is this amazing?
Holy shit, bro. Dude, that's like being stoned, right? It's just like, yo, I just figured it out. You've been around somebody's like that. I just figured this out. I just figured it out. It's like, what'd you figure out? It's like, I figured out everything. It's like, well, yeah. And it's like, oh shit, I forgot it.
The Shiab operator. I wonder if the Shiab operator was a victim of the distributed idea suppression complex. Have you heard about this?
Oh boy.
So this is the disk what he calls it, the distributed idea suppression complex. We're probably part of the disc. We don't get uniforms. I would like some like totalitarian style uniforms, but that's what's keeping him from being recognized. Maybe it's what made him forget what the Shiab operator is. But I mean, so these guys, we'll just listen to him laugh about it a little bit more, and then zoom out a little bit here.
And he doesn't know how to fucking define it. And what the hell are you doing, man? Like, if you don't know how to define something, that's fine.
Yeah.
But then just don't go around bragging that you have a theory of everything, because any scrupulous mathematician or academic would not release a piece of entertainment on a website with a subscription service to get access to it. This is purely for his own self-aggrandizement, and because he's not speaking to peers, and he's not intending to speak to peers. He's intending to speak down to people who aren't capable of understanding what he's saying. And he's doing this fucking thing which academics do sometimes, which is lord their intelligence over other people. And they use fancy words and convoluted language and intentional references which they know the person they're speaking to won't understand, as a means of elevating their own status.
Oh, another thing we need to bring up is one of the early Portal episodes was Eric having his brother on to talk about his brother's troubles in academia. So Bret purportedly, when he was early on in his like academic career, came up with like some principles, some biological principles having to do with evolutionary biology. I'm not going to pretend to, I can't remember the details. But basically the claim in that episode is that someone won the Nobel Prize in biology with Bret's work, or at least very, very much building off Bret's work, and did not cite Bret, like did not give Bret any acknowledgement.
Yeah, so this is maybe a good time to shout out the Decoding the Gurus podcast, who has basically made it their public output to just go through each and every one of the Weinsteins' claim and just dismantle them. And it's dirty work, but someone has to do it. Someone has to go into the weeds and look at every one of their goddamn claims and just show that it's misleading or yada yada. But so for listeners who want the details, which we are clearly not doing a great job of providing, just go listen. Go listen to them. But so there's something about Bret Weinstein having a brilliant idea and then having it stolen from someone who got the Nobel Prize. But the other part is that it has something to do with like mice telomeres.
Oh, there we go.
And the conclusion is that all medical research which is based on mice is not to be trusted.
It can't generalize to humans because of some reason. Right. Yeah.
So I was like, okay, if this is true, I'm going to hear about it in the news eventually.
Because medicines will start failing and people will start dying.
So this is the key thing, right? So Eric is making these huge claims about physics. And Bret is making huge claims about biology, and both are saying they're not taken seriously by the mainstream establishment. And both have earned a decent amount of credibility and reputation by making a lot of sense on the subject of wokeness. So anyway, a bit more scene setting and opinionating and stuff. But I
want to dive.
That's probably good. They don't get to the part. We won't get to the part where they say, they contrast him unfavorably to Sam Harris. We've already kind of discussed that, but it's interesting to me because, like, to me that's clear, and and it was clear very early. Like, even when the first Vox articles were coming out, you kick the tires on some of that stuff, and like, again, like the physical intimidation stuff, I'm not a fan of. But I also think like a guy who's becoming a pattern of like, you're not basically anti-racism. Like, I think that's more notable than like he voted for Bernie Sanders once. But anyway, to put all that aside, the disdain they have for people who are actually serious about these issues and physics, and I have a theory of everything. I mean, it's kind of a shock to me it gets this far, to where guys, I think like these are smart guys, like they understand smart in the sense of like informed about these science and technology issues. And that is something that I've taken a lot of interest in. I used to listen to like astronomy podcasts and shit like that. But if you stay in that realm and basically look for sort of like abstract rules with which to understand the world, as opposed to historicizing a little bit, I think it becomes a little bit easier to get maybe taken in by anti-wokeness charlatans like Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris.
I mean, they're waiting for you there, right? Like there's a whole like operation of like trying to put those people in front of folks who are interested and curious.
Yeah. And I mean, that's why I think it sucks. Like even fucking Joe Rogan, like there's all this curiosity out there that people want to devote a whole bunch of their time and attention to. And it gets sort of monopolized by these guys. Like they mentioned like Douglas Murray, man, the anti-Muslim like European dude. You think like your fucking cousin needs to like hear about Douglas Murray while he's just trying to hear about like how you take peyote in New Mexico? Like no, that sucks. That's a fucking bad influence. But anyway, that's what we're up against. But the good news is people will find the light after a certain amount of time, and you can't fool people forever.